go. Hello and welcome everyone. From MNT-EC, the Micro Nano Technology Education Center, and JATE, the Journal of Advanced Technological Education, this is the JETE Writers Studio. And each one of these sessions will have a guided conversation with a published author, and we highlight authors who publish in peer-reviewed journals, just like JATE. And we want to learn their story and their writing process. And we want to give authors a voice to share their tips and tricks about how to write peer-reviewed journal articles. Today, I'm pleased to introduce Kahlid Tantawi. Kahlid is a faculty member in the Department of Engineering Management at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. We'll discuss Kahlid's articles, which are titled Assessment of the Effectiveness of Using Drones for Smart Manufacturing Education and an investigation of the post-pandemic STEM education. Kahlid, thank you so much for coming and talking with us today about your writing process.
Thank you so much, Peter, and thanks everyone in the group for inviting me for this footage chat.
So Kahlid, before we talk about your writing process and your JAT articles, I'd just like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, describe where you live and work, and talk a little bit more about your background.
Thanks, Peter. So as you mentioned, so I'm actually a faculty in the Department of Engineering, Technology and Management and Technology. I'm a faculty of mechatronics at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga since 2019. Before that, I was actually a mechatronics faculty in Ma'lo State Community College in Smyrna, Tennessee. Actually, my background is in mechatronics engineering and electrical engineering. I also did research in MIMS, micro electromechanical systems.
Thanks, Kahlid. So Kahlid, we're going to be talking about your articles that were published in JATE, and I'll put the articles up here on the screen share. In a couple sentences, could you briefly describe what you were trying to do with those articles and what those articles are about?
Okay. Yeah, so actually, there are, like you mentioned, there are two articles. One of them, the first one that you see on the screen, the STEM 3.0 article. So this actually it belongs to what we call review articles. So basically, in this type of articles, you make a literature review. You review the most recent literature in the field. For example, let's say in this case, it's post-pandemic STEM education. And then you make a conclusion based on what you read. You cite basically what you saw, and you make a conclusion based on that. You express your opinion. So this type of articles is called a review article. And then the second type, which is the next paper, the assessment of the effectiveness of using drones in education. So that's a research article. Basically, in that article, basically we are publishing the results of the evaluations that we did in the ECE project. So it was actually for the ECE project, grant number 1187, and basically we published the results of the evaluation. So basically, it's the second type of publications.
Thanks, Kahlid. And I really like the way that you highlighted the difference between a review article, that was your first one, and then a research article, and that was your second one. Real briefly, can you describe a little bit more about what's the difference? And if you don't have any data from your project, can you still publish in a peer-reviewed journal?
Absolutely. So like I said, so actually usually the first step, if you when you do research, the first step is to actually review the most recent literature in the field. Like for example, the articles on education in the post-pandemic era. So basically, we reviewed what's out there in the field. For example, what was mostly used, for instance, for instance, robotics and virtual reality, what challenges were faced during the pandemic, and so on. So you review basically the most updated research, and then from that you can get to new ideas. So you can get actually several ideas from your review, and that can actually be a seed for a future project. So that's a good thing about it. Another thing, now you're up to date with the most recent things in the field. You can actually derive a conclusion based on that. So these are actually the two things that are, let's say, the two cornerstones in a review article. You need to review the literature. For example, you can go to Google Scholar, and from there we see the peer-reviewed papers in the field. And then the second, which is a very important, let's say, part in the review article, is to express your own opinion about that. So this basically usually is the first step when you do a research in any field. Then after that, like I said, you can have ideas that will help you. You can basically, it will be seeds for future projects. Now, the second type of papers, which is the research paper. So here you basically have data already, and you publish this data. They can be results of a project, like in the case here of the assessment of the effectiveness of using drones, or I mean something else, some other types of data. And so the good thing about this paper, the assessment of using of the effectiveness of using drones, like I said, so it's actually results from the evaluations. And since we are here in the ACE community, so evaluation is an essential part of the ACE project. So theoretically, each project, there are hundreds of projects. Theoretically, each project can publish a paper that shows the results of the evaluations. And I think actually this paper can be a good example that can help other ACE projects in that way. They can just look at it and just follow exactly the same process and publish the results. There's a lot of valuable results actually in different projects, and it's really a waste that they're not published. I think it's a really good thing to also have them published in this particular journal, because it's actually suitable for that.
Thanks, Kahlid. And I love the way that you highlighted, if you have an ATE funded center project, you've got evaluation data, and that your article provides kind of a model of how you can use that evaluation data in a peer-reviewed publication. That's a really good point to share. So Kahlid, could you tell me a bit about your writing background? How did you learn to write peer-reviewed journal articles?
So usually, actually, let's say, I guess the classical way, basically, being in a master's or PhD degree, you would be pushed to write papers, but they all actually start with one thing. They all start by reviewing literature. So I think, like, let's say for a beginner to start writing a paper, the first step is to review literature, to go to Google Scholar, whatever topic you're looking for, whether post-pandemic education or using drones in education, whatever topic you're looking for, just review articles and then take notes. Like, you can read articles and take notes. Then over time, you're going to start building a paper, but more importantly, you're going to start having your own opinion about what's the most important direction. For example, you can see, for instance, post-pandemic, that there's a lot of use of robotics, or for example, virtual reality, the metaverse. So you're going to start developing an opinion for yourself that can help you in the future seed a new project. So this is a classical first step for a beginner. But if you have data already, if you're working on a research project, and you have data, and like I said, there are a lot of very valuable data from the evaluations, and it's really a waste that they are not published so that others can make use of them. So in that case, if you have data, then you can just follow let's say, a regular approach, or I mean, let's say the classical approach in writing a paper, where you have an introduction, show how you stand out from others, and basically the methods and the results. Yeah.
Khalid, in each one of your articles, there were multiple co-authors. I sort of understand the idea of how you came up with the themes or the ideas for the articles. You've got a content area that you're an expert in, and also you've got some funding from the National Science Foundation that you've gotten, and so you want to make sure that you get that stuff out there. But how did you find your co-authors to work with you on these papers?
All right, thanks, Peter, for that question. So, actually, let's say having collaborations, as we all know, it's actually it makes the paper first stronger. It makes the research stronger because you can have different ideas coming in and different opinions and different contributions. So like each person has, let's say, 10 years of experience. We have like 5 authors. That's like 50 years of experience. So it's a lot of a lot of valuable contribution. And one thing is, for example, a lot of the co-authors I have gotten to know them actually from the conferences, for example, from the ATE conference, for instance. And sometimes, like you would hear of someone who's popular in a field, and just contact them by email and develop a collaboration with them. So there's and sometimes from college, my colleagues. Yeah, but I mean, typically, so you want to look for someone who can contribute and basically fill the gaps that you may have in a certain field. So it's like I said, it's something that makes it stronger and starts a collaboration and also makes the research as a whole stronger.
Thanks, Khalid. So you've got your idea and you've done your background research that you talked about, and maybe you found some co-authors. So what do you do first when you decided to write your paper? What was the first thing that you did when you're like, I'm going to write this paper?
Right. So like I said, so if you are writing a review article, then or actually both types. I mean, you should always you should do your homework, right? The homework is to review the literature. You don't want to write a paper that is basically someone else wrote 20 years ago, right? So make sure it's something that can contribute to science and something that is new, unique. So that's why you should do your homework. You should review the literature and see let's see in the last, usually like in the last 5 or 6 years, what has been there in the field. And then let's say in the research papers, it's very important actually to highlight, to write what makes your paper stand out from others. So what is your contribution? And that's going to be in the introduction section. So it's very important when you write the introduction section to make sure that you can convey that idea clearly. That's an important thing. Now for the literature review, it's like I said, it's usually to start when you start actually working on something, on a research, like typically for PhD students or master's students. Then you want to review everything in the field and, like I said, develop an opinion. Now that's where the co-authors come in. A lot of times, you can't basically, we don't know everything in the field. So that's where we can have co-authors who can help us, who can, for example, for instance, they can contribute. For instance, like I said, let's say in the post-pandemic education, some others might contribute in robotics. Some co-authors might contribute in the virtual reality section. Others in, for example, in the problems that were faced during the pandemic, and so on. So this is how you start. Now there are sections, of course, in the paper. If you have data that you want to present, so after the introduction, for me personally, the introduction is one of the most important sections because it shows, for two reasons. First, because anyone who reads the paper, they will start with the introduction, and it's very important to be very clear, no jargon, very clear, and the idea, how it stands out from literature, is very important to present. How does it stand out is very important. Then after that, you can present. You have to, of course, present the method that you followed, basically all the details, so that in other way, In other words, you present it in a way such that a person can recreate your research. So you need to present all the details as possible. Then finally, the results that you obtained from that work, and you end with a conclusion. So this is basically the main, let's say, the main parts, the main sections in the paper.
And Kahlid, do you tend to write those linearly? So you finish the introduction and then you do the methods and then you do the results and then you do the conclusion? Or do you do little bits of each one of those sections as you go through your writing process?
So so first you need to have the data, right? You need to have the results. So I think you should have you should know the results that you're presenting in the beginning. Then after that, you start with the introduction. You have to show. I usually start with the introduction, but I guess it depends on the person. Some people might, start with different other sections, but I start with the introduction so that I can show how does my data differ from others? How does it make it, why is it unique? Then after that, after I finish the introduction, I go to the other sections. Really, just they just basically flow, naturally. The method basically just write what you followed, and the results you just present what you had already. So it's really, let's say, I put most effort in the introduction, basically, to make sure that I can show that it stands out. And now there are it's also important also to, when you present the results, to show that you followed, or the method also, that you followed it properly, that there's no fault in the method that was used to get the results. So this also, so you need to concentrate on pretty much everything. But I personally, like I said, when I have results, I start with the introduction first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Kahlid, sometimes writers feel like that they don't have enough. They don't have enough data, or they don't have enough participants. They haven't done enough background research. They don't have enough time. How did you know that you had enough to start writing your articles? Both the review article, you've got to know you did enough background research, or the original research article where you had to have enough data. How did you know that you had enough and it was time to start writing?
Thanks. So actually, now for the when you present your results, of course it's a work from several years. So we had the project that has been running since 2018. So we have several years of results that we can present. So you can't have results, of course, in a short period of time. So if you're presenting that type of papers where you present results of an evaluation, you should have the results already. And now the only thing really is to show how you stand out from others. So what was unique about the project? Usually, this actually comes. A lot of the information is the same that you put in the proposal. When you first actually submitted the ATE proposal, you can actually use that information, because it's really, that's what you presented, to show how you can present something unique, right? So now I guess one thing is, initially, of course, it's going to be difficult. If you start initially, it's going to be difficult. There's nothing easy. There's a challenge everywhere. But also, if you actually love it, if you love researching, about in the field, in a specific field, that also contributes a lot. That makes you love putting time and effort towards it. And like I said, the benefits are a lot. There's many benefits. Particularly, when you are researching, actually, it starts seeds for future projects. It will give you, a lot of ideas for several projects. And like in the process, when I write papers, I get a lot of ideas actually for several other projects that I can work on in the future. And also another thing is, you can also involve your co-authors to assist you with that. Typically, so when you author a paper, there's basically the first author is the person who contributes the most in writing the paper, but there's also let's say the corresponding author, which might be a different person, or let's say the senior author, and that person basically guides, let's say, the authors on where to go. Usually, it's actually like in an institution, it would be the advisor, would be the corresponding author, and the students would be the first authors, or I mean the first and the second authors, or and so on. So I mean, if you have students, you can just guide them, and they will do the research for you. If you don't have students, you still can work on that, and it will help you a lot because it will give you ideas, like I said, in for future projects. And that's actually what I do usually. Usually I'm the first author and the corresponding author on the papers that I submit.
Thanks, Kahlid. Yeah, that's really useful information to know about corresponding authors, first authors, and then senior authors for different publications. Could you describe for me a little bit about what the manuscript submission process was like? Once you're
Okay.
finished writing your journal article, what happens next? What do you have to submit or attest to and make sure when you do that submission?
Hmm. Thanks. So once you write an article, you can look for a journal that's suitable for the field. So, for instance, if you're writing something about, if you're presenting results in, let's say, in electronics, and you obviously going to look for electrical and electronics journals, right? And so on. So the first thing is to look for a journal that's suitable for the field that you're publishing in. Now, after that, of course, now when you submit the manuscript, you need to so there's actually you need to make sure well, actually, the journal wants to make sure that you are submitting this only to them and not to others. Like it's before, I guess, in the past, it was apparently common that people would submit to several journals, the same article, several journals. Then they might get accepted in like two of them or three of them. Then they would decline the others and like choose, let's say, one that is the strongest. And this is not acceptable in the science community. So that's why, so you need to assure that actually you are actually serious in submitting to that journal. And that's why actually you usually journals ask for a cover letter that accompanies the manuscript, where you can you put the title of the manuscript and the authors list, and in addition you basically make a statement that it was only submitted to this journal. This makes you serious so that they don't waste the time of the reviewers able to review the paper and then for no reason, right? So you need to. So this is actually the cover letter comes with the manuscript. Sometimes some journals they will ask for high resolution images. So if you have, for example, images, microscope images, for instance, they will want the high resolution versions of the images. In addition to being in the manuscript, you need to submit the originals of the images. So it depends really on the journal, but typically you need to submit two things: the manuscript and the cover letter. Sometimes also, so they do a double blind review. So in that case, when you submit the manuscript, you have to remove the names of the authors, and of course, you don't know the reviewers' names. But usually, it's gonna be just a single side that is blinded, which is basically you don't know the reviewers. Yeah.
Thanks, Kahlid. So you talked about submitting your manuscript and your cover letter, and then you have to attest that this is original research, it's not copied from anybody, and that it hasn't been submitted somewhere else before. So let's talk about the review process. What did the review process feel like, and what did reading those reviews make you feel like? And then what do you have to do afterwards, after you get the reviews?
Thanks. So let me first put myself in the shoes of the reviewer. So when I actually review papers, the main thing I really look for initially, when I look at the paper first, initially, I really actually I like to check the references. So the references typically, I mean, if you have a few references, like 5 or 6, this means the authors didn't do their homework. So they didn't make a good review of the literature. This can give you an indication, and it can result in, in the rejection of the paper. It's really highly unlikely that a paper can be accepted if the authors didn't do their homework, right? And number 2, I check for the recency of the references. how recent are they? I have seen before papers that actually that had references, like the newest of them was like 12 or 13 years ago. So that gave me an indication that the work is actually very old. The work is very old. They are just basically publishing it. They looked in their records. They found out they decided to publish it too late, for instance. So the recency also. And then actually I look at the abstract. You can read the abstract just to give you an idea. After you verify that's actually recent, they did their homework, then you can look at the abstract just to give you an idea of what the work is. Is it worthy of publishing? And sometimes some journals will be, they will say, for instance, they want, if some journals are very strong, they will ask for something that has a significant impact on science. Even if it was original and good work, and it may not have a significant impact. Then we'll tell you, okay, you should go to another journal that has that, that's suitable for that impact on science. Then you can actually, I would read the introduction to see what exactly are they, what unique thing are they offering in the paper, and basically then you verify the method that was followed, just to make sure that the method actually can result in can give you these actual results. For instance, if someone said that they are using, for instance, let's say a microscope to check, for instance, for the strength of some type of material, then you can tell that the method is not suitable, because to check the strength of material, you should like test it. You should have a destructive testing, right? For instance. So you need to check the method, make sure that the methods are suitable for the results that they mention. So this is actually being a reviewer, if I put myself as a reviewer. Now, when you receive the reviewer comments, sometimes they would be, I mean, you should actually accept that. Sometimes the reviewer comments would recommend declining or rejecting the article for some faults. And this, you should take a look at this as a valuable feedback. It's really, I mean, good feedback for you to improve and then resubmit to the journal or to another journal that can be suitable for the level that of the research that you're presenting. So another thing is if for example, if they recommended the article for publication with changes, then you can work on the changes and submit them back to the journal. So in whichever was the feedback that you receive, it's actually always going to be a valuable feedback for you, because sometimes you don't see things in the article that others, a third party, can see and tell you to improve.
Thanks, Kahlid. And I like how you said sometimes having a rejection letter, that is valuable feedback. It just doesn't mean that you're not good as a writer. It means maybe you should put more research into your article, or maybe you need some more data, or maybe that means reaching out to new co-authors to refine your idea. I think that's a really good point to keep track of. So I've got one more guided question, and then I'll open it up to anybody else if they've got any questions for you. Kahlid, what advice would you give new writers who are starting their first peer-reviewed journal article? What advice would you give somebody who's writing their very first article?
All right, thanks. So actually, let's say, so I think for the journal, for JATE, you're gonna the main community is gonna be the ATE community, Advanced Technological Education community, and in that community, like I said, they are sitting on valuable data. So because the ATE, basically the projects and centers, they come with evaluators, and the evaluations actually they assess the effectiveness of the project. You can publish. You have actually a lot of data to publish, and this data can be used by others and help others. So it's actually very important. I think it's really valuable data that needs to be published in the journal. I would say the most important thing is to let's say, I mean, well, of course, when you actually present the data, obviously you have done a lot of research in that, and it's actually really just the most important thing is just to put it in writing. Like, I mean, don't let this data sit and disappear and no one see it. Just write it out and let people see it. And like I said, the writing part is not a problem really, because you can have a lot of institutions, they provide writing support for you. So you can have initially it's going to be a little difficult probably, but then I mean you will of course learn the process. But the writing itself is not going to be the difficulty. It's just you are willing to present this data and publish it.
Thanks.
And thanks. I would say, like, from a writing perspective, really, and let's say the most important thing just to pay attention to is to show how does that stand out from others. In other words, the introduction. Like when you write the introduction, just make sure there's no jargon, and try your best to show how does this stand out from other projects in the field. What's unique about your project?
Thanks, Kahlid. I like how you sort of highlighted this uniqueness as we've been going through our conversation, and an idea that when you start, there are a lot of resources around for writers. So see if there's somewhere at your college or at your institution that can help future writers.
Yeah.
So I'd like to open it up now to anyone else in the meeting. If you have any questions for Kahlid, either over microphone or in the chat.
Hi, Kahlid. Thank you very much. It's great to listen to you. You had a lot of sequential pointers on how to go forward. So there was one space that I have struggled with, and maybe you can sort of guide me in that area. You said in the introduction, as you're doing the literature review, you sort of figure out a slant and try to develop your own opinion. What would be the process of doing that? There must be, as you're doing all of the research and looking at the reviews, would you give some pointers on how do you sort of figure your slant and what is unique, or what's your opinion on writing? Because I think that's the main piece and why your articles are published, right?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the question. So, so yeah, when you do a literature review, so what I do actually, I take notes. I keep a document open and I just write notes from. So first, I search on Google. You usually I search on a database for peer-reviewed articles, papers, and a good one for a good database is Google Scholar. And just go to Google Scholar, search, for example, for, like I said, post-pandemic education. Then you will see articles. I select usually the last few years, or for example, in this field, it would be in the last 1 or 2 years. And a lot of these papers that you will read, you will see in the introduction, they will mention the same thing that I just mentioned. In the introduction, they will show how is their paper unique, and what's the most recent advances in the field. So the introductions of the papers are actually very useful for you. You can take notes. That's what I actually do. I take notes of what I read, and what I do actually immediately when I take the notes, I express them in my own words right away. So that's when I actually write the paper. I have almost the paper ready. By the time you have read like 10 or 12 articles, you have already a paper, there. So so I take notes actually for that, and then as you start reading, you're gonna see how there's gonna be, for example, there's a trend, for instance, on using, like I said, for instance, robotics in the post-pandemic era, or for instance, because of the many industries, for example, hospitals, for instance, and healthcare, they needed to use where there's no contact between people, technology with no contact. Or, for example, virtual reality, for instance, and augmented reality in maintenance when the airports, when there was a shutdown and no travel was there, they needed to have something remote, right? Like augmented reality. So you're going to start developing ideas of your own of how education is going to be. So now that we have augmented reality, for example, in maintenance, that means you need to train a student in the maintenance in the engineering technology on that field, and using artificial intelligence, for instance, AI-based technologies, and so on. So, so once you have all these, once you do the review, you have an idea of what's the state in the field. Then you're gonna. So the second essential component is to put your own opinion. So basically, for instance, you can, and that's where the co-authors can play. So, for example, you can assign for one co-author, for instance, to look for the challenges that were faced during the pandemic. For instance, we are talking about that topic, and others, for example, will work on how's education gonna be in the next decade, and so on. So these are basically putting your opinion is very important, or otherwise, actually, it's not a paper. You can't publish anything. You cannot just publish a summary of other works. You have to put your own opinion in it. And typically, this is actually the first step for PhD students and master's degree students. They will be assigned always to make a review, a literature review. And like I said, the main valuable thing I get from it is that it gives me a lot of ideas for future projects. So it's, let's say, I mean, that's for me the main thing I get, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I really like the fact that you express it immediately in your own words and have it in a document. So you're translating your reading into writing immediately, because sometimes you read 10 articles, by the time you go back, you've forgotten what the first article said. It sounded interesting at that time, but now you're like, I don't know what they were talking about. So I really like that. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it's very important to take notes. Yeah. And like I said, it just builds up, automatically to make an article for you. You have an article, you just add your opinion. There you go. You have a paper.
Thanks, Sheila. That was a great question. So in the chat, there's a question about, are you working on any articles right now, Kahlid? And then how do you find time to write? Do you schedule time? Do you always write at the same time during the day? Do you have a set number of hours that you work on writing each week? How do you find the time to do writing?
So actually, let's say whenever I'm free, like if I have free time, I just sit and read and write articles. Actually, right now I'm actually let's say I'm writing an article on advances in Industry 4.0. So I'm actually right now I'm actually reviewing literature in advances in the field, and basically summarizing and writing an article. Seeing how it advances. Like I said, it's really, I mean, it's from this is the classical way, really, of like I said, having projects, creating new projects, creating new ideas. It's really to see what's up there, what's up to date in the field.
Yeah, I like how you say you can fit writing in at many different times. When you're free, then that's some of the time that you can do writing.
Yeah, sometimes I'm at home. My son would be playing. Next to me. I would be in his room. I would just researching and reading articles and writing. Basically, I have. I mean, I keep everything on Google Drive. So anywhere I go, I just sign in and open the document and add to it. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions for Kahlid about writing peer-reviewed journal articles or about his 2 articles in JATE?
How often, and I saw other authors on there, I saw Jared, it made me chuckle. How often do students get to help you with that process, and what do you use as your cutoff to determine what role they have played and whether or not they are included in that publication as far as an author?
Yeah, so actually, thanks. That's a good question. So actually, I try to include students as possible. And there are students who are really, really good. They can contribute good works. So, for instance, actually, yeah, we had actually a couple of students who were co-authors. Undergrad students, they will just need a little training on the writing, but they can actually contribute a lot of work. For example, I would assign for them different specific tasks. Like, for instance, research about using drones in agriculture, for instance. And then they will like send me, for example, a paragraph with, of course, proper citations. I ask them, of course, with the citations. And then I improve it because I improve the writing. But yeah, they do actually play an essential role. I usually give them, let's say, small pieces of work, like very specific research about this thing in that field, and so on.
That's a great way to get them started with that little piece and say, you're like, you know, find me all this stuff on this topic. That's awesome.
Yeah, especially for undergrad students. Yeah, thanks. So I guess I will just my advice for the ATE community, if you allow me, everyone, is to really publish. I mean, you have data. Everyone has data from your evaluators, and all you need to do is just publish that data. Just put it together, especially if it has, for example, let's say, impacts. How many students has it impacted? What methods did you follow to impact the students, for instance? So I mean, there's a lot of valuable data that everyone's sitting on, and it's really good to have it published and presented. And like I said, the JAT is actually probably the best journal for that, for the ATE community. Next. And if you need help with that, you're welcome to contact me, or you can actually refer to the paper, the assessment of effectiveness using drones, because it's a really classical way of presenting ATE data. You can just look at it and like follow, you know, the same classical way where there's a method and results. Basically, we presented in it results that include, for example, demographics from different states, educational backgrounds of the participants, and so on.
And Kahlid, we're going to have a high school group that's going to learn how to be drone pilots, and then also they're going to then do things with middle school students. If and when it's appropriate and that comes to be, would you feel comfortable speaking to that group? And that's okay if you do not?
Oh, sure.
All right, that'd be great.
No,
Thanks.
Sure.
Cool. That sounds really neat, Christine.
Where are you, Christine? In which
I'm
state?
in New Jersey. I'm in New Jersey, so
New
we're at
Jersey.
the beach. Yeah, like if you're ever going to be around that area and you want to hit the beach at a nice point, maybe May,
Yeah.
June, I can have you in as a speaker at our symposium.
Yeah, we're planning for a conference there.
Where are you located?
In Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Oh, okay, it's a bit of a drive. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'll wait for a conference.
Yeah, that'd be great to meet up.
I have a question. Kahlid, do you have a reference software that you use? The reference software that you use to keep all your
literature? Okay. Oh, thanks. So now for references, yeah, some people use software, but actually I use the built-in referencing in Microsoft Word. So in Microsoft Word, if you go to, like, for example, if you open a Microsoft Word document, there's a tab in the top that is references, that says references. And it's actually, I use this. So it's basically like a database. Whenever you're adding a reference to your paper, I immediately actually put it in that database. And the good thing is, if you like, wherever you save that document, once you open it, actually it loads that into your computer's main reference database. So if you want to use, for example, the same references for other papers, all you have to do is just go to that references, look for the title or look for the author, anything in the reference, and you can just add it to the new paper. So I only use the Microsoft Word referencing database, and it's really helpful. Of course, I have to build it myself, but I mean, over time, I have hundreds of references in it. So, and of course, I keep adding.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think it's very important, actually, what Ruth mentioned here, the references. It's very important to follow, to use. I mean, if you like to use the Microsoft Office, you can use other software, but it's very important because at some point, sometimes you will change like the locations of paragraphs from, for example, here to there, different sections, and you don't want to lose. At some point, you will lose track of the references if they're not dynamic. I mean, if the references are not from dynamic where they can change automatically the numbers, then you'll lose track of the references. So it's very important to actually get from a database, to use a database. And I would personally say Microsoft Office is very, very excellent. It has a very excellent way of putting the references in a database.
Thanks, Ruth. That's a good question. And Kahlid, it's interesting to know that you use what's built into Microsoft Word, because if you're writing your article in Word anyway, why not just use the tool that's already built in?
Exactly. It's
Any
very
other?
strong tool, actually.
Yeah. Any other questions for Kahlid today? Well,
Well, that
Kahlid,
was great. That was great. Thanks.
Thanks.
yeah, thanks, Kahlid. And thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your experience and expertise about writing peer-reviewed journal articles. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope that we please keep in touch and see you on JATE again.
Thank you so much. And thanks, everyone. And I hope you all have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks.